Hey guys, welcome to my channel Shiva's Tech Up. So in this series of Java tutorials, today we will be looking into variables in Java. Okay, so this is the agenda for today. So first we'll be looking at what is a variable and syntax for declaring and initializing a variable and classification of variables based on the scope. It means the position in which that particular variable is being defined in a class, then declaring multiple variables, and there are some general naming conventions to define a variable, so we will also be looking into those rules. Okay, so first let us try to understand what actually is a variable. So basically it is a name of a memory location in which we will store some data. Okay, it can be any type, like it can be integer, it can be string, it can be character, it can be byte, it can be boolean, anything. Basically, another term which we can use for a variable is attribute. So basically in a class, we will be having a set of variables or attributes and a set of methods or functions. Okay, so it's a kind of alternative name for a variable is attribute. Now, when you consider the third point, we can store different types of variables by specifying the proper data type. It's not like we just have one type of variable. We can store any type of variable by specifying its data type. For example, if you want to store a value of a string data type, so you need to specify a variable name with a proper naming convention, then specify its data type as string, then assign a string to that particular variable. Okay, so the next point is variable can also be defined at various scope within the class. So regarding this scope, we'll be learning it in the coming slides. Okay, so we can define variables at different positions in a class, within a method, outside the method, and so on. Okay, we'll also be looking into them in details. Okay, now, so there are two things which we can do with a variable in a class. We can just declare a variable and leave it and assign a variable at a later point in the program, or at the time of declaration itself, we can assign a value which is called as initializing a variable. So if we look at the syntax, so basically first it has a data type which is nothing but the type of the data. It can be integer, string, boolean, character, byte, anything, and a variable name. So it should have a proper variable name, okay, that defines what actually that variable is being used. Okay. Now, when it comes to initialization of a variable, the syntax is the same, just that we are going to assign some value. Okay. Data type, variable name equal to some value. Okay. This value can be based on the type of the variable that you are using. Okay. So let us consider these examples. For example, one side we have declaration of variables and the other side we have assignment of variables. Okay, so for example, age. So this is a meaningful name, right? So this variable holds the age of a particular person, which is of integer type, right? So the next variable is name, which is of string type. So this is a meaningful variable name which stores the name of a particular person, which is of string data type. Whether this particular name is valid or not. Boolean. Okay, Boolean is one more data type which either holds on, off, true, false, 0, 1 kind of values. Next variable type is character, which holds a single alphabet. So that is being defined by CHAR, which stands for character. Then byte, double, long, short, all these are different data types. So we will have a separate session for different types of data types and the range of values it holds and how can we define them and how can we use it multiple places. For now, in this session, let's concentrate on variables. Okay, so now on the right hand side, we are assigning the variable. So we are using the same variable name, same data type, but how can we assign a value to the variable, right? So if you consider int age equal to 10, string name equal to Shiva, which is in double quotes, and boolean valid, is it valid or not? If it is valid, then true. If it is not valid, then false. And we can also assign a single alphabet to a character type of variable, and we can assign a value by to be equal to 10. Okay, so this is the assignment of variables, or you can also call as initialization of variables. Okay, Okay, so next, now what else we can do with variables? So we can declare a single variable of same type or a different type, or we can define multiple variables to store multiple values. Okay, so let us consider with few examples. So if you see the first example over here, so here we are declaring three variables A, B, C, which is of the same type, integer, and we are assigning the same value 10. So if you try to print it using system.out.println A, B, and C, it will just print the 10 value. So this is one way of declaring. You need not declare it in separate lines. In order to save the lines of code, you can also assign the variables in this format given you want to assign the same value to the multiple variables. Now, this is second one is the example of assigning different values to different variables. Okay, int a equal to 10. For example, another variable b you are assigning a different value, int c equal to 30. So this is one more way of assigning separate value to each variable. Okay. So next we'll be looking at the classification of variables. Yes, in the earlier slide we have checked the types of variables. That is based on the data type. This is based on the scope. So based on the scope, we have classified the variables into three types. Each has its own significance. So first, let us consider instance variables, static variables, and local variables. And also let us try to understand it with an example. Okay. So first, what is instance variable? So basically, if the variable value is varied from object to object, for example, you are going to create multiple objects or a single object, but whenever you are creating multiple objects in order to assign some value to a variable, so the latest object that is being used in order to assign the variable that will be printed in an output. Okay. So one more condition for an instance variable is that it should be declared within a class, okay, inside the class, but outside the method. So whenever you are declaring inside a method, that we'll be looking into the next slide. But for now, the instance variable is declared within the class, but outside the method. Okay. Now let us understand what is the scope of instance variables. I mean, where all we can access, right? So scope of instance variable is exactly the same as the scope of the object, because instance is nothing but class variables. You can also call it as class variables. So instance variables are created at the time of object creation and destroyed at the time of object destruction. Okay. So this is one more point. So they are stored in heap area, so that instance variables are also stored in the same memory area or in the heap area. Okay, so instance variables you can also call it as class level variables, where we can I mean assign the variables inside the class. Now let us try to understand the second variable type based on the scope, static variable. So if I have to tell about the static variable in a single line, it is almost equal to instance variable. Just the only difference is we will be using static keyword in front of the variable type. It means like, so for an instance variable, in order to access that variable, you need to create an object. Then using that object, you can access the value that is present within that variable. But whenever you are defining a static variable, it is also defined within the class, but just the difference is directly by using the class name, you can access that variable. We need not create a separate object that takes a separate memory location, which is a wastage, right? So whenever we declare a static variable, directly by using class name dot variable name, we can access the content that is present in that variable. Okay, now if you consider the definition, so if a variable is not varied from object to object, that is like we are not going to create an object in order to access the static variable. Such type of variable is called a static variable. Okay, so basically one more important point regarding this scope is that the scope of the static variable, as I said, it is exactly the scope of the class, because static variables are created at the time of class loading and destroyed at the time of class unloading. In the previous slide, it was related to the object, right? the definition was same because instance variables are created at the time of object loading and destroyed at the time of object unloading. In this case, since we are using class to access the variables, so the definition will be the same, created at the time of class loading and destroyed at the time of class unloading. Okay. So classes are stored in the method area so that static variables are also stored in the same memory area or method area. Okay. So the only difference which you see when you compare instance variable with the static variable is instance variables are accessed using the object, whereas static variables are directly accessed using the class. Okay. That is the only difference between static variable and instance variable. Regarding the scope, it remains the same, right? Now, let us consider the third local variable. Third type of variable is local variable. So basically, we can also call it as a temporary variable, which can be declared inside a method. Okay, it cannot be accessed outside the class, but it is specific to only that particular method in which we are creating that variable. Okay, so for example, let us consider understand the scope of local variables. Local variables will be created while executing the block in which we declared it. Block in the sense, for example, you will be writing a function. In that function, you will be declaring a variable or initializing a variable. So this variable is applicable within that particular function, but not outside the function. Now, let us consider the scope. Once the block execution is completed, automatically the local variable will be destroyed internally. So the scope of local variable is the block in which it is declared. Okay, you can also understand this block as a function. Okay, so let me write it down as a simple example. For example, I am writing a function public void local. Okay, so this is a normal function int a equal to 10. Okay, so for example, this particular variable a equal to 10 will be accessed and is accessible only within this particular function. It won't be accessed outside the function because it is not declared at a class level, but it is declared at the method level. Okay, that is, it is local to this particular function. Okay, that is the meaning of local variable. Okay. Okay, so let us try to understand with an example, which, so this example shows you the difference between instance variables, class variables, static variables, and also local variables. Okay, so first let me mark what are instance variables. So this is instance variable, and this is static variable, and this is local variable. Got it, guys? So this is how you will be specifying. For example, if you consider this int a equal to 10. Okay, so this is defined. So for example, first let us understand this particular program. In this particular program, we are defining two classes. Okay, so this is the first class and this is the second class. Okay, in the first class, we are defining a method or a function. Okay, now inside the class, we are defining two variables. The first one you can call it as instance variable. As I said, both instance and static variables are defined in the class level, right? Int a equal to 10, static int c equal to 20. The difference between the first variable and second variable is you have prefixed the keyword static in front of the data type. Got it? So this is instance and this is static variable. Now let us try to understand the local variable. Okay, so we have defined a function public void print variables int b equal to 20. Now you are trying to print this particular b to the output console. Now if you understand the difference between a, c and b, so outside this particular function, it can be accessed within the class, these two, anywhere within the class, these two variables. But when you consider B, it can be accessed only within this particular block. Okay, it will be accessed only in this particular block. Now let us consider the remaining examples. Like as always, you are going to create an object for that particular class. So this is the class variable example class. So for that, I am going to create an object by using new keyword. Then VEC. So this object name dot print variables. You are calling this local method. So what will be printed? So whenever this local method is called, it automatically takes this value b equal to 20 and it will print printing local variable b. Now let us consider calling this instance variable. Okay, so as I said, instance variable will be called using an object. So the same object you are going to use VEC. So it automatically points to this particular class dot A. Here what I am doing, I am just calling this variable and I am printing it to the console. Okay, so printing instance variable, it will be printed A equal to 10. Now let us consider this is the example of static variable, calling static variable. As I said, for static variable, we need not create an object. It will be called whenever you are using the class name. Okay, so class name is variables example class dot C. If you directly call this way, so it will be automatically called and 20 will be printed in the console. Okay, so that is the difference between instance variable, local variable, and static variable. Okay, so first let us try to understand what are the various rules for defining a variable. So, I mean, you can always define a variable as you like, but Java specifies some naming conventions that needs to be followed. Okay, so what is the first rule for defining a variable? It can contain letters or alphabets. It can contain digits like 0 to 9, 0 to 10, and so on. It can contain underscore and it can contain dollar sign. Okay, so let me write some examples of uh, proper variable naming conventions. For example, name. So this is using letters. Okay, name 01, or you can also write it as name 1. It has a digit, name underscore 1. So this is a proper naming convention for a variable. Okay, you can also specify it in this way. Okay, this is also a proper naming convention for a variable. Okay, and one more important thing is names must begin with a letter. Okay, it should begin with an alphabet. So for a proper meaning, right? And also it should start with a lowercase and cannot contain white space. So basically one example of the third point is it should always be this way but not this way, or okay, so the second one and third one are invalid, whereas the first one is the correct naming convention for a variable, which should start with a lowercase. Okay, so it can also begin with a dollar and underscore. You can also define a variable which starts with a dollar and also which starts with underscore. Okay, but normally we won't be using this convention most of the time. We'll be using with the third point, like lowercase letter and also which doesn't contain a white space. Okay, and also they are case sensitive as Java is a strictly case sensitive language. There is a difference between this name and this name, or this name. Okay, there is a lot of difference. For example, you are declaring variable in this way and you are printing it in this way, so it will print you with an error. Okay, it won't be printed because it is case sensitive. Even one alphabet is uppercase or lowercase, or if it is mismatching, it doesn't print. So that is what we call it as sensitive. And also, one more important point is we cannot use reserved keywords in Java as variables. For example, let us try to understand some of the reserved keywords that are present in Java. Void is a reserved keyword that is present. You cannot use this as a variable name. For example, static, you cannot use this as a variable name. Final, you cannot use this as a variable name. Okay, string, for example, this defines the data type, you cannot use. So these are the reserved keywords in Java which you cannot use them as variables. Okay, let us try to understand with an example. So here I have created a class with name variables example, and I have created a main method. So first let me declare an instance variable a equal to 10, which is defined class level, then int b equal to 20. So this I will declare it as a static variable by preceding with the static keyword. Okay, then what I will do is I will create a method to show you the scope of a local variable. So I will just add a method called as local variable, then int c equal to 20. Okay, here I will directly print this particular value. The local variable is c. Okay, so this will be printed whenever this particular method is called. Okay, so first, then let me create a another class called as public class, or else rather I will just use the normal class before specifying public. So class variables example, example. Okay, so next what I need to do is let me close this class definition here itself. So let me create an object for this particular class variable example. So let me copy this class name equal to new example. Okay, so this is the name of the class. Now by using this object, what all we can access? First, we can access the instance variable, that is A. Then also we can access the static variable, that is B. And in order to access the local variable, you need to directly call that particular method in which that particular local variable is present. So let us do that. So first let me call the local variable which is present in the method local variable. So automatically the local variable will be printed. Now let me print, since I did not write the system.out.println statement for instance and static, let me write it down. The instance variable is plus object name dot a. Okay, so the instance variable will be printed. Now let me print the static variable. The static variable is dot b. Okay, the static variable will be printed. Okay, so this is local variable. Let me comment it. This is local variable which whose scope is within this particular method, and this is static variable which is defined class level, and this is instance variable. Okay, so let me execute it and as Java application. Okay, so the local variable is 20 because first I am calling this particular method local variable. So it is 20 is printed. Then I am calling instance variable. Instance variable is nothing but 10. Okay, the value of instance variable is 10. Then I am calling the static variable int b equal to 20. So here I am printing b. So its value is also 20. So the 20 is printed. Got it, guys? That's it for this video, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel Shiva's Tech Hub, and get notified to the future updates. And also don't forget to share it on various social media platforms. Thank you.